The air hangs thick with the tang of iron and incense, a metallic bite that clings to your throat like a lover's desperate grasp. Torches flicker along marble walls veined with gold, casting shadows that twist like serpents in agony. You hear at first a low, rhythmic chant from the guards outside the chamber doors, their spears scraping stone in time with some forgotten hymn to victory. Then the screams cut through, sharp as shattered glass, not from one throat but many, echoing off the vaulted ceiling of the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill. A girl no more than 16 summers, her simple woolen stola torn at the shoulder, stumbles into the circle of light. Her dark hair, once braided with olive leaves from her family's farm in the Sabine hills, now mats with sweat and something darker, warmer, that drips from a shallow cut across her palm. "She's one of the chosen," they whisper, "a virgin from the provinces, pure as the first snow on Vesuvius." But purity means nothing here. The emperor lounges on a couch draped in lion skins, his broad shoulders gleaming under oil, eyes wild with the fire of a man who believes himself half-god, Commodus. His laugh booms like thunder over the sea, as he raises a goblet crusted with gems, the wine within swirling red as the life seeping from her hand. She locks eyes with you, a silent plea in the dim glow, her lips moving without sound. "Not me. Not tonight." But the doors seal shut, heavy bronze groaning on hinges forged in the fires of Capua. The music swells, flutes and lyres from Egypt, drums from the German frontier, drowning her gasp as hands pull her forward. The other women circle, their silks stained, faces painted like masks from the theater, but their eyes hollow, echoes of the girls who came before. Commodus rises, his Herculean club more scepter than weapon tapping the mosaic floor, each strike a heartbeat counting down to dawn. The blood from her wound soaks into the tiles, mingling with older stains, a map of nights that never end. And as the first force kiss lands, wet and claiming, you realize this is no dream of excess. This is the machine grinding, night after night, devouring the innocent to feed one man's endless hunger. But wait, because in the shadows, a woman watches, her fingers curling around a vial of something bitter and final. She knows the cost of silence, and tonight, the wheel turns. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic cruelty. These events, drawn from ancient accounts, are as disturbing as they are documented. If this pulls you too close to the edge, step away, I'll understand. For those who stay, we won't linger on the wounds. We'll trace the gears that turned them, the empire that oiled the madness, and the quiet cracks that finally broke it all. Imagine Rome not as the eternal city of marble triumphs, but as a vast, humming engine, its pistons, the legions marching from the Rhine to the Nile, its fuel the grain ships docking at Ostia, its governor a philosopher-king scribbling meditations by lamplight. That was the world Marcus Aurelius ruled. From the frozen camps along the Danube to the sun-baked forums of the capital, his son, Commodus, born under that same vast canopy in 161, just outside Rome's walls, was meant to be its heir. The first emperor sired in the purple, they called him, groomed from boyhood in the shadow of his father's stoic gaze. But this wasn't the tale of a fallen prince, wild and unchecked. This was a machine designed for one man, built on the bones of a republic long crushed under imperial boots. The Senate, once the beating heart of power, now whispered in corners, their decrees rubber stamps on the emperor's whims. The Praetorian Guard, those elite shadows with swords at their hips, answered to gold and favor, not oaths. And the provinces, Gaul's vineyards, Egypt's granaries, Britain's fog-shrouded mines poured tribute into Rome's coffers, blind to the rot at the center. Marcus had held it together through plague and barbarian raids, his letters home a quiet plea for virtue in a world gone feral. When he died in 180, far from the palaces, his body shipped back like cargo, Commodus stepped into the gears at 19, young, handsome, with curls like Apollo's and a frame built for the gymnasium. The reframe hits hard here. This wasn't mere indulgence. The folly of youth handed absolute power. This was a system primed for unraveling, where one weak link could flood the streets with poison. Marcus had chosen blood over merit, breaking the chain of adopted heirs that had steadied Rome for generations. Commodus, no philosopher, craved the roar of crowds over the scratch of quills. He sued for peace with the Marcomanni tribes almost immediately, trading his father's hard-won lines for a swift chariot ride home. Rome welcomed him with garlands and games, but the whispers started early. The boy who dances, who whistles like a slave boy in the baths. Why does this echo now? Because power's machine never changes its oil. It chews the pure, spits out the broken, and demands applause for the mess. Commodus didn't invent the arena of excess. He just turned the house lights on, revealing the bloodstains beneath. In the beginning, it hummed smoothly enough. Picture the palace on the Palatine, that seven-hilled crown overlooking the forum's sprawl. Its corridors lined with busts of stern ancestors, Augustus with his eagle gaze, Trajan mid-stride toward Dacia. Commodus arrived in triumph, his legions trailing like faithful hounds, the air alive with the salt spray of the Tyrrhenian and the dust of the Via Appia. He was the golden son, after all, the one who'd shared his father's tent on the frontier, learned the thrust of the pilum amid the mud and moans of the wounded. But the camps had marked him, not with wisdom, but with a taste for the edge, the way a gladiator's blade catches torchlight, the hush before the mob's verdict. The empire stretched like a lion at rest, from the misty moors of Caledonia to the sun-scorched sands of Arabia, its roads veins pulsing with merchants' carts and tax collectors' ledgers. Under Marcus, the Marcomannic wars had bled the treasury dry, barbarians hammering at the gates like wolves on a shepherd's door. Commodus inherited that storm, but chose shelter. He negotiated terms with the tribes, generous, some said shameful, freeing the legions to garrison the frontiers without the grind of endless marches. Back in Rome, the Senate hailed him as pious, the dutiful, granting triumphs and arches etched with his victories. Yet the machine's underbelly growled. Corruption seeped in like Tiber floodwater. Officials skimmed grain shipments, governors auctioned justice to the highest bidder. Commodus, indifferent to scrolls and audits, delegated to favorite Sauterus first, a Bithynian chamberlain with a soft voice and sharper ambitions. Those early years weren't all shadow. He married Brutia Crispina, a senator's daughter with hair like polished bronze, in a ceremony that lit the city for days. Banquets flowed with Falernian wine, spiced with pepper from India, and the theaters echoed with Plautus's comedies, laughter a balm after plague's toll. But cracks spiderwebbed quick. Commodus, who as a boy had molded clay figures in the nursery, tiny soldiers locked in eternal combat, found the real games irresistible. He hosted spectacles in the Colosseum, that hulking ellipse of travertine and tufa, where 80,000 throats could roar as one. At first, it was patronage, beasts from Africa, net fighters from Campania. But soon, he yearned to step inside. His human side flickered in stolen moments, or so the chroniclers hint. A youth spent trailing his father through strategy tents, absorbing not just tactics but the weight of command, the way Marcus would pause mid-dictation, eyes distant, pondering the soul's quiet amid empire's roar. Commodus absorbed the glory, too. At 12, in the baths of Centum Cellae, when a slave drew water too chill, the boy emperor's rage nearly claimed a life. The attendant survived, spared by a quick-thinking underling who burned a sheepskin to mimic the deed's smoke. It was a spark, that fury, fanned by isolation. Marcus, ever campaigning, left his son to tutors Onesicrates for Greek verse, Antistius for Latin prose, who praised his quick wit but winced at his cruelties to pets. The turning point came sharp as a gladius thrust. In 182, 3 years into his solo reign, whispers turned to steel. His sister Lucilla, widow of Lucius Verus, her beauty, a legend from Antioch to Athens, plotted with a cadre of senators and her lover, Quadratus. They saw Commodus slipping, his nights lost to dice and dancers, his days to dreams of the arena. The machine demanded a steady hand. They offered a coup, but the blade missed its mark. The assassin, a burly German named Quintilis's man, lunged in the Colosseum's undercroft, that labyrinth of cages and catwalks. Commodus twisted free, his guards swarming like hornets. Heads rolled Lucilla's among them, banished first to Capri's cliffs, then silenced forever. The purge followed. Senators quartered, their villas seized. The forum splashed with the ink of false treason charges. It crystallized, then, the paranoia. No longer the boy whistling in the peristyle, Commodus became the hunter, his palace a web of spies and shadowed eyes. Sauterus fell next, his Bithynian whispers deemed too close. Perennis, the Praetorian Prefect, rose on the corpse a soldier's son, broad as an ox, who funneled the guards' loyalty through Commodus's whims. Under him, the emperor retreated deeper, the machine whirring on without him. Taxes hiked to fund games that grew bloodier. Bread doles stretched thin as the plebs grumbled in the Subura's alleys. But that betrayal in the tunnel? It echoed, a ghost in the steam of every bath, the clink of every goblet. From there, the nights began to bleed into the days, and the virgins, those fragile offerings from loyal provinces, became the toll for his imagined sins. Dawn breaks slow over the Palatine, a pale smear on the horizon where the aqueducts carve the sky like stone veins. It's 183 now, the Empire's machine idling after the purge's frenzy, and the palace stirs with the clatter of bronze ewers and the murmur of eunuchs sweeping last night's petals from the floors. You can almost taste the olive oil sizzling in the kitchens below, mingled with the faint rot from the cloaca maxima snaking beneath. Guards in polished lorica segmentata pace the colonnades, their hobnails sparking on porphyry, eyes darting to every flutter of a curtain. The air hums with tension, not the open roar of the Colosseum, but a coiled whisper, like the hush before a lion's lunge. Enter Livia. Though names like hers were rare in those shadowed halls, most girls from the outer villas kept their humble tags, like the potter's daughters from Nemi or the vintner's kin from Veii. But Livia she became, whispered by the maids, who braided her auburn locks with myrtle from the sacred groves. At 15, she was a vision of the old republic's grace, skin like fresh curds, eyes green as the sea off Puteoli, hands calloused from helping her father press grapes under the autumn moon. Her family, minor equestrians clinging to their Sabine estate, had sent word of loyalty when the purges swept the Senate letters sealed with wax stamped by a laureled ring, pledging grain and sons for the legions. It was enough to earn an invitation, or so they thought, a feast in the emperor's honor, a chance to bow before the Golden One and return with tales for the village fire. She arrived by litter at dusk, the journey from the hills, a blur of cypress shadows, and the creak of axles on the Via Salaria. The palace swallowed her like a minnow in the Tiber vast atria floored in opus sectile, walls frescoed with hunts where nymphs fled satyrs, their drapery slipping in eternal tease. Servants in crisp tunics pressed cool cloths to her brow, murmuring of the emperor's generosity, how he'd spared the provinces from tribute hikes that spring. Livia smiled, her heart a bird in a cage, dreaming of the figs ripening back home, the way her brother's laugh carried over the vines. She was untouched, vowed to Vesta in her mother's chapel, her purity a quiet shield against the world's rough edges. The banquet unfolded in the triclinium, that sprawl of couches under a ceiling painted like the vault of heaven, stars pricked out in gold leaf. Commodus reclined at the head, his frame draped in a synthesis of Tyrian purple, the fabric whispering against his skin as he gestured for more wine. Perennis lounged nearby, his Praetorian cloak a scarlet slash, eyes scanning the room like a hawk over the Campus Martius. Guests filled the space senators with forced mirths, their togas hiding ink-stained fingers from hurried denunciations, matrons from the Aventine, jewels glinting like accusations. Livia sat among the younger women, her stola of fine linen, a gift from the escort, nibbling dormice in honey, the sweetness cloying on her tongue, the tension built like thunderheads over the Apennines. A poet from Alexandria recited verses likening Commodus to Hercules, his labors mere preludes to the emperor's glory, slaying the Nemean lion, paling beside the beasts he'd felled in the arena that week. Laughter rippled, brittle as autumn leaves, but Livia caught the undercurrent, glances darting to Perennis, who nodded approval, his hand never far from the dagger at his belt. Then the emperor rose, his voice a rumble that silenced the liars. "Rome demands purity," he proclaimed, eyes sweeping the hall, as clean as the Vestal's flame, as fierce as my blade in the sand. He spoke of loyalty, of gifts from the gods, but his gaze lingered on the virgins clustered at the table's end, the daughters offered like tithes, their cheeks flushed with nerves and spiced Falernian. Livia felt it then, the shift, like a tide pulling at her ankles. A guard approached, his face impassive as basalt, murmuring of a private honor. The emperor wished to bless the faithful personally, in the inner chambers where the sacred libations flowed. She rose on wooden legs, the room tilting, her hand brushing a senator's wife who whispered, "Breathe deep, child, it passes." The corridor beyond was a throat of shadow, torches guttering in iron sconces, the air growing heavier with musk and myrrh. Doors groaned open to a chamber vast as a temple, its floor a mosaic of Dionysus entwined with maenads, their limbs a tangle of abandon. Couches ringed the walls, piled with cushions from Persia, and in the center, a low altar of black marble, etched with runes from the East symbols of fertility, or so the priests claimed. Commodus waited there, alone now, his tunic unlaced, revealing the scars from his latest bout, a lion's claw across his ribs, painted with ceruse to gleam like silver. "Come," he said, voice soft as a lover's, extending a hand heavy with rings. Livia stepped forward, her pulse a war drum, the air thick with the scent of blood faint, underlying the incense, from some earlier rite. He took her palm, turning it up, and with a small obsidian knife, sharp as a surgeon's tool, nicked the flesh. The cut was shallow, a ritual prick, they said, to mingle her essence with his divine vigor. Crimson welled, hot and startling, dripping onto the altar where it pooled like wine in a libation bowl. "See," he murmured, dipping a finger in the stain, tracing it across her collarbone. "We share the Empire's life now." The demand came gentle at first, wrapped in silk. A dance, to honor Hercules, her body swaying to the flutes that slithered in from hidden alcoves. Refusal flickered in her throat, but Perennis loomed in the doorway, his shadow a blade. She moved, steps halting, the blood trickling warm down her skin, soaking the stola's edge. The other women entered then, ghosts in gossamer, their eyes averted, hands guiding her into the circle. Commodus watched, his breath quickening, the machine's gears meshing in the dim purity offered, taken, twisted into spectacle. The act itself blurred, a haze of hands and heat, the emperor's form a mountain eclipsing the stars painted overhead. Screams? No, not hers. These knights learned silence early, or paid in fuller cuts. When it ended, Dawn's fingers clawing at the shutters, Livia curled on a couch, the blood crusted like rust on her skin, her vow to Vesta a shattered amphora at her feet. Servants draped her in fresh linen, murmuring of the honor bestowed, the gold denarii now hers to send home. But as they led her to the outer gates, the Tiber glittering below like a serpent's scale, she glanced back. Commodus slept, sprawled amid the cushions, his club within reach, dreaming perhaps of lions or the Senate's bowed heads. Perennis met her eyes from the threshold, a nod that sealed the silence. "Speak, and your vines wither." Word trickled out, not in floods but droplets, whispers in the thermae, where steam loosened tongues, notes scrawled on wax tablets, burned before the vestal's fire. Other families received similar blessings, their daughters returning hollow-eyed, estates suddenly lush with imperial grain. This wasn't about one girl's fall, her blood, a fleeting stain on marble. This was the system flexing, loyalty bought with flesh. The province's best offered to sate the center's thirst. Perennis orchestrated it, his ledgers balancing terror with tribute. The Praetorians paid double to blind their gaze. In the provinces, fathers wept in olive groves, but the machine ground on legions fed, games funded, Rome's bred circuses, drowning doubt. Historians later pieced it from fragments, Dio's ink still fresh from those years, noting how the emperor's companions in crime swelled the harem to 300 souls, matrons and maidens alike, their knights, a ritual of excess that mocked the old gods. And the modern echo? Look to any court where power trades in silence, where the pure are paraded and the broken bought off. Livia vanished into that web, her story one thread among many, but it pulled tighter each night, until the palace pulsed like a heart gone septic. But that knot began to fray, not in the bloodied chambers, but in the ante-rooms where the real blades sharpened. Shift your gaze now, from the girl's trembling form to the man who oiled the locks on those doors. Perennis, the prefect whose shadow stretched longer than the emperor's club. He wasn't some caped villain from the poet's scrolls, but a cog turned human born, to a legionary in the Spanish hills, risen through ranks slick with frontier mud, his ambition a quiet forge. To him, the virgins were ledger entries, incentives for governors, bribes for silence, the system's lubricant when tribute lagged. From Perennis's perch in the Castra Praetoria, that fortress of brick and menace on the Viminal's edge, the empire looked like a vast abacus, beads of gold sliding toward Rome. He'd watch Commodus depart for the arena at midday, the emperor's chariot rattling over cobbles thronged with cheering plebs, then turn to his scrolls. Reports flooded in, Gaul's harvests thin from flood, Egypt's Nile sluggish with silt, the grain fleets docking light at Ostia. To compensate, he hiked the Angaria, those forced hauls on provincial backs, turning free men to mules under the lash. And when whispers of unrest bubbled, like gas from the Solfatara's vents, he'd dispatch riders with sealed orders. A village elder disappeared in Britannia's mists, a Syrian merchant's caravan waylaid near Antioch. The spread was insidious, a vine choking the trellis. In the eastern satrapies, where silk roads met the empire's fringe, governors echoed the rite, selecting gifts from bazaars and harems, shipping them westward in veiled ostae, their holds reeking of fear, sweat, and myrrh. Perennis incentivized it brutally. Compliance meant Praetorian protection, a legion's shield against Parthian bows. Refusal, a visit from the frumentari, those secret police who slithered like eels through the night. Numbers blurred into human weight, whole estates emptied of daughters, their brothers conscripted to fill the gaps, villages hollowed like gourds left too long in the sun. Not 12,000 souls, but 12,000 hearths gone cold, the Sabine hills echoing with unanswered calls at dusk. Yet, here's the breather, a quiet irony amid the grind. Perennis, that iron fist, kept a small garden in his quarters, tending roses smuggled from Alexandria, thorny blooms that scratched his calloused hands as he pruned at twilight. He'd hum old marching songs from his father's camp, the petals falling like forgotten oaths. It was his one softness, they say, a nod to the boy who chased butterflies before the pilum called. Contrast that with the machine's roar. While he tallied virgins like amphorae of oil, Commodus staged his Herculean hunts, clubbing tethered beasts in the palace's private circus, their blood sprayed to anoint the couches for the evening's rites. One night, after a bout with ostriches beheaded in a whirl of feathers, the emperor paraded the gore-slicked skins before his guests, laughing as the girls recoiled, their silks forever marked. A different victim flickered in that haze, not a Sabine innocent, but a Thracian dancer named Selene, her lithe form a whisper from the Black Sea's shores. Captured in a border skirmish, sold through Delos's slave markets, she arrived in Rome with bells on her ankles and fire in her veins. Perennis chose her for variety exotic, unbroken to remind the emperor of conquests beyond the bedchamber. She refused the cut, spitting at the altar's edge, her words a lash. Your gods drink no virgin's blood, only tyrants' lies. The guards dragged her, but Commodus paused, intrigued, his mania craving resistance like wine craves the grape. That night, the rite twisted her defiance, a spark in the dim, the other women watching as she twisted free once, twice, before the hands closed in. Bruised but breathing, she survived to the antechamber, where a maid slipped her a shard of pottery, etched with a single word: flee. The machinery creaked under such weights. Reports climbed the chain. A legate in Moesia, overhearing tavern talk of the blood feasts, his dispatch to Perennis unread amid the prefect's rose clippings. Incentives warped guards promoted for discreet collections, senators granted estates for turning blind eyes. But the human toll mounted, not in tallies, but tales. A merchant's widow in Capua, her last daughter vanished, hanging herself from the atrium's beam. A bishop from the eastern provinces, preaching fire and brimstone in hidden basilicas, his flock scattering like chaff. The system spread its shadow, from palace silks to frontier mud, proving excess wasn't indulgence, it was empire, calibrated to consume. And yet, in the quiet hours after the flutes faded, Perennis would stare at his blooms, thorns pricking deep, wondering if the vine he'd tended would strangle him next. He had 3 months left. He didn't know it yet. The wheel spins faster now, the machine overheating, its pistons slamming like war drums in the dead of night. It's 185. The Ides of some forgotten month Commodus has rechristened them all, August to Commodianus, December to Amazonicus, as if words could chain the calendar to his whim. The Palatine throbs under a harvest moon, bloated and low, casting the Colosseum's arches in bone-white relief across the valley. From the barracks' edge, the city sprawls a labyrinth of insulae, leaning like drunks, the forum's temples glinting like teeth in a skull. But inside the palace, time dilates, each breath a labored pull against the weight of what comes. Slow it down. The air in the grand triclinium thickens, heavy with the residue of roast peacock and spikenard oil, the brazier's coals hissing as slaves fan the flames. Commodus paces the mosaic floor, his bare feet slapping against the cool stone, each step echoing off the frescoed walls where Bacchus lolls amid grape-clustered thighs. He's changed since Livia's night broader now, muscles corded from endless practice bouts in the ludus magnus, his skin oiled to a sheen that catches the lamplight like burnished bronze. The club rests against his thigh, not the ceremonial toy, but a weighted oak shaft, scarred from sparring with chained slaves. His eyes, once playful as a boy's, burn now with the fever of a man chased by ghosts. Lucilla's shade in every shadow, Perennis's ambitions, a thorn under his skin. The guests assemble, a tableau of forced revelry. Senators in starched togas, their faces masks of sycophancy, equestrians from the provinces, pouches heavy with bribes, and the women, 30 strong tonight, a harvest of offerings culled from villas and villages, their stolas sheer as mist, eyes downcast like suppliants at Delphi. The virgins cluster at the rear, 7 in number, their palms already pricked in the antechamber, blood beating like rubies on linen. The scent hits first coppery and sharp, mingling with the sweet rot of overripe figs on silver platters. Then the sound, flutes trilling high and frantic, drums throbbing low as heartbeats, a lyre plucking strings tuned to minor keys that twist the gut. Commodus halts at the altar's edge, that black slab veined with quartz, now slick from prior night's libations. He lifts a ewer of wine, Falernian, vintage of his accession, pouring it slow, a crimson cascade that swirls with the girl's mingled drops. To Hercules, he toasts, voice booming off the vault, who slew the Hydra, and I, its heads. The company echoes, goblets clinking like chains, but the air crackles, overripe as a storm. Perennis stands sentinel by the doors, his hand on the hilt, but tonight his gaze flicks uneasy rumors from the German legions, dispatches of mutiny unread. The emperor senses it, the fracture, and turns it to fuel. Bring the first, he commands, and the guards part, revealing a girl from Hispania, her olive skin glowing, dark curls unbound like a sibyl's warning. She steps forward, the circle closing, the women's hands linking in a chain of silk and sorrow. The tension coils, Commodus circles her, club-tapping rhythm, his breath hot on her neck as he murmurs of divine unions, of Rome's seed sown in purity's soil. Refusal glimmers in her eyes, a flash of Iberian fire, but the machine presses. A guard's grip on her shoulder, Perennis's nod like a headsman's axe. The right peaks, bodies entwining in the lamplight's haze, the blood from her palm smearing across skin like war paint, the emperor's form a colossus eclipsing the rest. Implication hangs heavy, the gasps swallowed, the flutes rising to drown, the shift from ritual to ravage. The women's circle, a barrier that blurs into complicity. But this climax cracks wide. As the girl slumps, spent and staring, a slave boy barely 10, with curls like young Bacchus stumbles in from the service door, a flagon slipping from his grasp. Wine splashes the altar, diluting the blood to pink, and in his fright, he blurts a truth Perennis meant buried. The legions march, master they say, the prefect plots your throne, the room freezes, flutes faltering to a whine. Commodus whirls, club rising, the air electric as a thunderclap. Perennis lunges, dagger flashing, but the emperor's blow lands first oak-cracking ribs like dry branches, the prefect crumpling in a spray of scarlet. Chaos erupts, senators scrambling for exits, women shrieking as guards clash blades, the virgin from Hispania crawling toward the shadows, her hand leaving bloody prints on the mosaic. The crack widens. Perennis gurgles a denial, but Commodus kneels, club heavy across his throat, whispering, "You thought to wear my skin?" The prefect's eyes bulge, life ebbing in wet gasps, his rose garden a distant jest. The emperor rises, gore-flecked and triumphant, the machine shuddering as Praetorians swear fresh oaths over their commander's corpse. That night, the rite dissolves into slaughter loyalists, purging suspects in the corridors, screams, chasing the moon across the tiles. The girl escapes in the melee, vanishing into the Sabura's alleys, her bloodied stola a ghost's shroud. Commodus, spent, collapses amid the cushions, the club clutched like a talisman, unaware his own gears have slipped. The empire trembles, the wheel wobbling, and in the east, a new favorite stirs Cleander, the chamberlain, his eyes on the bloodied throne. 3 months drag like chains through mud, the machine lurching forward on fumes. Perennis's body, stripped and scourged, dangles from a gibbet on the Capitoline, a warning flapping in the winter gale's crows, pecking at eyes that once scanned ledgers. Commodus, hollowed by the frenzy, retreats deeper, his days a blur of arena sands and private ludus bouts, where chained gladiators yield to his club with scripted grace. The purges ripple outward, Perennis's kin rounded up in the dead of night, their villas torched like funeral pyres, the Tiber churning with the bloated forms of the unfaithful. Senators huddle in their atria, wax tablets scratched with frantic pleas, while the plebs in the Transtiberum mutter of bread prices climbing like ivy on the insulae walls. Power shifts like sand under tide. Cleander, the new chamberlain, a Corinthian freedman with a honeyed tongue and ledger-sharp mind, slithers into the vacuum, his networks woven from brothels to barracks. He expands the harem's toll, turning offerings into a tax. 1 virgin per cohort's muster, their blood rites now standardized, vials shipped to frontier forts as loyalty seals. The emperor, adrift in his Hercules dreams, signs the edicts without glance, his nights a carousel of stained silks and sated roars. Brutia Crispina, his empress, fades to Capri's exile, her adultery a convenient veil for his wanderings executed quietly, her head a trophy in the prefect's vaults. Survivors scatter like ash. Livia, back in the Sabine hills, weds a silent veteran, her children raised on tales of Rome's blessing, the scar on her palm a hidden map. The Thracian Selene, smuggled east by a sympathetic legate, finds harbor in a Bithynian convent, her dances traded for prayers that echo the flutes she once fled. The community frays provinces hoard grain, legions grumble over diluted pay, the Senate's benches half empty, ghosts in senatorial robes. Long term, the machine sputters, famines gnaw the borders, barbarians test the limes anew, the denarius debased to foil, its silver kissed goodbye. And the irony? Commodus, slayer of beasts and sisters, renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana in his image, only for his assassins to scrub it clean before the ink dried. The documents meant to exalt him, arches and coins stamped with Herculean curls, became kindling for the pyres of his foes, the empire's fire fed by the very vanities that scorched it. Fast forward through the dust of centuries, to a dig site on Rome's eastern fringe, where the Palatine skirts meet the Celio's scrub. It's 2013, a sweltering July, and a team from Sapienza University sweats under the sun, trowels scraping travertine like whispers from the underworld. Leading them is a quiet archaeologist named Livia, her hands steady as a surgeon's, glasses fogged from the heat, probing a villa's undercroft long buried under medieval vines. The air smells of turned earth and pine resin. The crews chatter, a mix of Latin tags and espresso breaks. Then the breakthrough, a miniature coliseum, no taller than a man, its walls incised with friezes of club-wielding figures, lions mid-leap, the central arena pocked with drain holes for what? Blood, they guess, from practice bouts where the emperor honed his divine strikes. Livia uncovers a shard, first a bronze plaque, green with patina, etched with Commodus's profile, his curls frozen in arrogant wave. It proves the tales weren't all tavern bluster. This was his private ludus, a toy empire where he played God without the mob's roar. Deeper digs yield more, amphorae shards stained crimson, perhaps from ritual wines or worse, a lion's tooth polished to talisman, and a small obsidian blade, its edge still keen, nicks along the grip suggesting repeated use. No grand tomb, no golden sarcophagus, just these echoes, tangible as the scar on a survivor's palm. The find hits the journals quiet, then explodes, headlines screaming of the mad emperor's playground, Livia's team sifting dirt for clues to the man behind the myth. What it proves? The machine left marks, not just in ledgers, but in stone and soil. Those blood rites, the virgin's toll, they weren't vapor. Fragments linger, like the plaque's faint inscription, Imperator Hercules Romanus. Livia, packing the artifacts in foam for the Capitoline Museum, pauses at dusk, the city lights winking below. He thought himself eternal, she mutters to a colleague, but time keeps the real score. Why does it claw at us still? Not the gore, but the mirror. Power's palace today, be it boardroom or ballot box, still demands its virgins the young idealists fed to the grinder, their blood metaphoric, mostly anointing the next round. This teaches that systems don't fall from one madman's club. They crumble when the cogs prefects, senators, us let the wheel spin unchecked. Resistance, it's in the shard, the escape, the dig that drags shadows to light. Human nature bends, but doesn't break easy. Lucilla's blade missed, but it carved the path for Narcissus's hands. The universal truth, purity isn't in the untouched. It's in the voice that says enough, even when the flutes play on. Return to that chamber now. The torches guttered low. The mosaics Dionysus leering in the gray pre-dawn. The blood has dried to rust. The couch is empty, save for a forgotten myrtle sprig, crushed underfoot. What changed? The wheel jammed. Perennis's rose garden trampled. The virgin circle broken by a slave boy's spill. The machine coughed, spat out its mad heart, and Rome awoke to a new year. The Palatine's shadows longer, but pierced by the first light. They were meant to vanish the girls like Livia and Selene. Their stories' scrolls burned in the prefect's pyres. Their blood just another libation to forgotten gods. But they didn't. They endure in the dig's quiet yields, in Dio's fragmented ink, in the Colosseum's passage where an emperor once fled a blade, in Herodian's pages, yellowed but unyielding, and the villa's mini arena, now glassed in museums where school children gape. And now they're here with you, not as ghosts to haunt, but voices to heed, because you chose to listen, to trace the gears, past the gore. If this tale stirred something, a question on the machine's modern hum, or the scar's power leaves, drop it in the comments below. Your words keep these stories alive, unburied, and in the end, the purest vow isn't to gods or emperors. It's to remember, the wheel turns, but we choose when to jam the spoke.